Alright, here's your guys' video, EdPuzzle video on your notes for solving quadratic equations by completing the square. Now remember, you have to take these notes in your notebook, take a picture of your notes, and then submit it to Google Classroom for you to get your guys' credit today. And these notes are important because you guys will be practicing problems on this on Thursday and on Friday in your guys' breakout rooms. So make sure you understand to the best of your ability and copy these notes down. Okay, so let's talk about a square first, you guys. So a square has all the sides are the same, right? And you know an area of a square, right? You know an area of a square is length times width, or it's really side times side, because you guys know, oh, the length and the width are the same for a square, right? So it's side times side, and that's how you guys get s to the second. S to the second is the square, area of a square. So we are going to be using this knowledge of a square in order to solve for our quadratic equations. So basically, when we do complete the square, you are looking for something times itself. You're looking for something times itself, and then from there we are going to solve. So, to solve ax squared plus bx plus c is equal to 0 by completing the square. So I wrote down some steps for you guys, and at any point in the video, you can just pause it, right? You can just pause the video and get this down so that you can, once you have it all down, then you can just play it and listen to me just explain it. So here are the steps that we are going to be using, okay? These are the steps we're going to be using. So I'm not going to read this all to you out right now because I'm going to read this to you while we solve for our equations, okay? So I am going to keep it right there, and we are going to just solve for example 1. So when I'm solving for example 1, in step 1 it says move all the terms to the left side so that it is in standard form and equal to 0. So when I look at example 1, it's already equal to 0 and everything's on the left hand side, right? Okay, step 2, it says divide by a so that the coefficient of x squared is 1. Well, when you guys look at example 1, the coefficient of x squared right now, it's already 1. So we're already done with step 2. Now, step 3, it says take half the coefficient of the x term, squaring it, and adding and subtracting it to the left-hand side of the equal sign. Basically, adding and subtracting by b over 2 squared. So, with that, so what step 3 is talking about, you guys, is we are going to, so I'll just do it to the side. So it says take the coefficient of b, or of the x term, which is negative 2. So we're going to take the coefficient of the x term, which is negative 2, halving it, and then squaring it. So negative 2 over 2 is negative 1 to the second, and negative 1 to the second is just 1. So in step 3, right, it says, okay, we took half the coefficient already, we squared it, and we have to add our 1 to the left hand side and the right hand side of the equal sign. So we're going to have x squared minus 2x plus 1 minus 1 minus 15 is equal to 0. That's exactly what step 3 is telling me, right? Then step 4, it says factor the perfect square trinomial and simplify the c with the minus b over 2 squared. So it's telling me, hey, we can factor this into a perfect square trinomial, and then we gotta just simplify these two. So for that one, you guys, since it says a perfect square trinomial, right, in this first parenthesis, what two numbers multiply to 1, but when you add them together it gives you negative 2, and that's minus 1, right? Minus 1 and minus 1. If you guys need a visual, right? what two numbers multiply to 1, but when you add them together, it gives you -2. That's -1 and -1. So, it's going to be x minus 1 times x minus 1. But you guys know, oh, x minus 1 and x minus 1, that's the same. So it's going to be x minus 1 squared. This is what we wanted, right? Because that's a square, you guys. It's raised to the second power. And that's why I talked to you guys about this square. Because the area of a square is s times s, which is s squared. When we do this complete the square form, this is what we want. We want to have something times itself, x minus 1 squared. So following our steps, we factored it into a perfect square trinomial, and then it says simplify c with the -b/2 squared. So that means, you guys, we need to just simplify this part. What's -1 minus 15? That's -16. Okay? Now, it says just solve by isolating x. So when we solve by isolating x, I'm going to add by 16 to both sides, okay? Because we're isolating x now. Oopsies, that should say 0. And then we are going to square root both sides. Now remember, when you guys square root both sides, you are going to get plus or minus this value. So whenever you guys square root, remember you're going to get plus or minus. Oh, sorry, plus or minus 4. Because the square root of 16 is 4. So we have two equations, right? We have x minus 1 is equal to 4, or x plus 1 is equal to 4. Sorry. We have x minus 1 equals 4, or x minus 1 is equal to -4. And then we solve. So x is equal to 5, or x is equal to -3. And that is how you guys solve by completing the square. Takes some time, but you guys just gotta get used to it by following the steps, right? So example 2. So in example 2, let's take a look at our steps, right? I'm trying to reposition it so you can see the steps. Okay, so it says, move all the terms to the left-hand side. Got it? I'm going to subtract both sides by 35. X squared plus 2x minus 35 is equal to 0. Okay? Next, step 2. Divide by a so that the coefficient of x squared is 1. The coefficient of x squared right here is already 1, so we don't have to do that. Step 3. Half the coefficient of the x term and square it. So this is the coefficient of the x term, right? So we're going to half it, and then we're going to square that. 2 over 2 is 1 squared, right? And 1 squared is 1. So we know our term is 1, and it says, and add and subtract it to the left-hand side of the equal sign. So I'm going to have x squared plus 2x plus 1 minus 1 minus 35 is equal to 0. Step 4. Factor the perfect square trinomial. So we're going to factor this. We're going to factor that. Now remember, it should give you something squared, right? So what two things multiply to 1 but added together give you 2? That's x plus 1, right? It's x plus 1. So it's going to be x plus 1 squared. This will help you guys too. It's always going to be, remember, it always factors into x plus or minus the b/2 squared. And you know it's plus or minus based off of this one. If it's plus, then it's going to be plus b/2, and if it's minus, it will be minus. Okay, following my step, right? So we already factored it into perfect trinomial. Now simplify the c with a negative b over 2 squared. So that means, you guys, we have to simplify this. So that's minus 36 is equal to 0. And then lastly, we just solve by isolating x, so add 36 to both sides. Square root both sides, but remember, when you guys square root, you're going to be getting plus or minus the square root of 36, which is 6. Two equations pop out. X plus 1 equals 6, or x plus 1 is equal to negative 6. And then we just solve from there, you guys. So we get x is equal to 5, or x is equal to negative 7. Okay, lastly, again, you guys have your notes, right? So step 1, move everything to the left-hand side. So I'm going to add by 2 to both sides. Alright, step 2. It says divide by a if, so that we can get the coefficient of x squared to be 1. Look at, the coefficient of this is 2. We cannot have that, so that means we need to divide both sides by 2. So 2 divided by 2 is 1, so that's just going to be x squared. 8 divided by 2 is 4, so that's just going to be 4x. Negative 5 divided by 2, it's going to be a fraction, so it's negative 5 over 2. 0 divided by 2 is 0. Okay, so now, third step, right? You half the term, the coefficient of the term with x, so we gotta half that, right? So 4 divided by 2, and you square it. 4 divided by 2 is 2, so 2 squared is 4. So with the 4, right, it says we gotta add and subtract it to the left-hand side. So x squared plus 4x plus 4 minus 5 halves is equal to 0. Now what step are we on? We are on step 4. So step 4 says, right, it's going to be in the form of x. Because this is plus, I know it's plus, right? And what's b over 2? Our b over 2 is the 4 over 2 squared. And you guys know that's just x plus 2 squared. So that was that. And now this part, you guys, look at your steps, right? We got to combine these two. So if you guys are not comfortable adding together your fractions, right, this is how you guys go about it. So you guys know, okay, negative 4 is over 1 minus 5 over 2, right? Gotta get a common denominator, which is 2, so I'm going to multiply this one top and bottom by 2. Negative 8 over 2 minus 5 over 2, which is negative 13 over 2. So that means negative 4 minus 5 halves is negative 13 over 2, which is equal to 0. Now we just solve for x, so we're going to add 13 halves to both sides. X plus 2 squared is equal to 13 over 2. Now we square root both sides, right? So we're going to get x plus 2 is equal to plus or minus the square root of 13 over 2. Okay, this goes into two terms, so we're going to get x plus 2 equals square root of 13 over 2, or x plus 2 is equal to negative square root of 13 over 2. Subtract 2 to both sides for both of them, so x is going to equal to square root of 13 over 2 minus 2, or x is going to equal to negative square root of 13 over 2 minus 2. So that is how you guys complete the square. We will be practicing this tomorrow, but make sure you guys write all these notes down, right? Write these notes down in your notebook, take a picture, and send it to Google Classroom, okay? So hopefully you guys understand this and we'll practice all day tomorrow. Alright, peace.